May 2016, variant 1 part 1 paper, paper 1, variant 1 and May 2016. This is paper, full paper questions and with answers. I'm going to read all that. Um, Number 1, choose any two of the following passages from the Quran and A. Briefly describe the main themes in each passage. 4 marks. B. Briefly explain the importance of these themes in a Muslim's life. 4 marks. Answer A. Themes. 1. Surah 2, Ayat 255. A theme of this long verse of a Macedonian Surah Al-Baqarah is Tawheed. It outlines God's inimitable attributes that distinguish Him from His creatures. The words Al-Hayyul Qayyum, the ever-living and self-subsisting, refers to His creative and sustaining force behind His existence. God is free from human weaknesses and needs such as tiredness or sleep. His authority encompasses the entire universe, and he remains totally uninfluenced in establishing his reign over his created world. The word Kursi signifies both his authority and knowledge about all his domain, and because he is its sole creator. Therefore, one of his creations can escape his knowledge in the remotest parts of the universe. It further emphasizes God's unique right of exercising his authority to the extent that no one can intercede or plead for anyone else um, unless he himself grants permission for that. The passage ends with the word Hayul Huwal Aliul Azim that represents his ultimate supremacy and exaltedness. The Quran repetitively mentions God's supreme status, such as God be exalted, the true King, the Lord of the throne of grace, Surah 23, Ayat 116, Al Mu'minun. Passage 2, Surah 601 to 103. The three verses are part of Surah Al-An'am, a later Meccan surah. Theme of the verses is God's absolute uniqueness. They were revealed to prepare the Muslims to interact with the Christians and Jews living in Medina who had corrupted the belief of Tawheed. The passage begins with the word Badi that refers to God's power to create anything out of nothing. He only commands be and it happens. It proceeds by rejecting any false belief of God having a son or a consort because he is far beyond any such needs or relation. The next verse stresses on God being the sole creator and having power to dispose of all affairs. These unmatchable attributes convince the Muslims to worship none but Him. Verse 103 refers to God's absolutely sublime nature that keeps humans from um, for conceptualizing Him in any way. The verse further mentions His ability to have knowledge of all things. This is endorsed by another Quranic verse that says, For God is He who understands the finest mysteries. Surah 22, Ayat 63, Al-Hajj. Passage 3, Surah 1, Al-Ikhlas. This is the opening surah of the Quran and Surah Al-Fatiha. I'm sorry. And this is the opening surah of the Quran and is a summarized version of the entire Quran. Due to its importance, it is known by many other names. It is the only surah where Tasmiyah, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, is its first verse. The first four verses describe God as Lord of the worlds, both known and unknown to humans. His grace and mercy and his own overlordship on the day of judgment. The next two verses teach the believers to worship God alone and to seek His help. The last two verses ask them to beg God and to show them the straight path designed by Him. It is the path followed by those who were blessed by God, not one that incurred His anger. The right path is contained in the rest of the Quran and Sunnah of the Prophet. Another verse mentions it as, and verily you guide humans to the right path. Surah 42, Ayat 52, Al-Shura. Al-Shura. B. Importance of themes. 1. Surah 2, Ayat 255, Ayat al-Kursi. The passage strengthens the belief of the Muslims in Tawheed in terms of God's oneness, uniqueness, majesty, and glory. It also crystallizes the belief of Tawheed and trains them to condemn shirk as the humans are vulnerable to go astray under the influence of Satan. There is repetitive mention of God's authority, unlimited knowledge, and powers in order to instruct them to worship and depend on God alone. The message of this verse frees the believers from fear of all other powers, visible and invisible. By believing in God's absolute powers, Muslims tend to develop his fear as is commanded in another verse. O you who believe, fear God as he should be feared. Surah 300 Ayat 102, Al Imran. At the same time, this verse inculcates a sense of accountability in his court. Muslims usually recite this verse as an invocation for protection of their lives and belongings. The Prophet is reported to have said, whoever recited Ayatul Kursi after the obligatory prayer, nothing prevents him from entering paradise except death. And therefore, Muslims recite the Ayatul Kursi while leaving their belongings at or outside home. Passage 2, Surah 6, Ayat 101 to 103. This passage helps Muslims clearly understand the belief of Tawheed in terms of God's unique nature and powers. Its main objective is to emphasize on monotheism and exclusive divine powers as against polytheism and paganism. Muslims are taught to believe in God's absolute oneness and that had been corrupted by the misguided communities repeatedly in the past. Thus, it removes any trace of confusion about God's entity from the hearts and minds of Muslims. The Quran reminds the Muslims God's omniscience repeatedly, and He is with you wherever you are. Surah 57, Ayat 4, Al-Hadid. Similarly, another verse reinforces this in these words, for we are nearer to Him than His jugular vein. Surah 50, Ayat 16, Kaf. It therefore removes any confusion about God's personification and configuration in order to keep the belief in Tawheed intact and pure. According to the Mufassirin, commentators of Quran, when this surah was being revealed, 70,000 angels were assigned to accompany it. Therefore, its recitation has a strong enlightening impact on the hearts of Muslims as they remain away from satanic misguidance. Passage 3, Surah 1, Al-Fatiha. This surah is so important that it was revealed first in Mecca and then in Medina. Its recitation is mandatory in daily prayers as declared by the Prophet. There is no prayer, salah, if a person fails to recite Al-Fatiha in it. Sahihan, according to a hadith Kursi, Hadith Qudsi, when Al-Fatiha is recited sincerely and consciously as a suspicion in Salah, everybody of it is received with grace and immediate acceptance for God. Therefore, children in all Muslim families are taught to learn this surah as a part of their spiritual training. The Prophet called it the mother of the book, Ummul Kitab, according to another hadith. When the Imam finishes the surah, the Muqtadis followers should say Amin, may it be, as it coincides with the angels saying the same. Muslims, by reciting the surah, develop a strong hope of God's compassion. They also try to be pious because God is not only merciful but also master of the day of judgment. This keeps them reminding of their accountability in the divine court of justice. Question 2a describes the ways in which Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman were involved in the compilation of the Quran. 10 marks. Part B. The Quran should not have been compiled in written form because it did not take place during the Prophet's lifetime. Agree or disagree with this statement giving reasons for your answer. 4 marks. Answer A. The Quran had not been compiled during the life of the Prophet. Circumstances changed after his death. When hundreds of memorizers of Quran were killed in the Battle of Shamama during Hazrat Abu Bakr's caliphate, Hazrat Umar, sensing the danger, addressed Hazrat Abu Bakr, I fear that there will be casualties among the readers of the Quran in different places and many things of the Quran will be lost. I consider it proper and that you should pass orders for the collection of the Quran. Hazrat Abu Bakr replied, how shall I do something which the Messenger of Allah did not do? Hazrat Umar, however, was successful in persuading the Caliph, and on the advice of Hazrat Umar, he decided to compile the Quran. Hazrat Abu Bakr asked Hazrat Zaid bin Sabit, the most authentic scribe, to collect all Quranic verses. Realizing the tediousness of the task, Hazrat had said, by God, if you had put the task for taking away this certain mountain, it would not have been heavier to me than what you have ordered me. Finally, he too was convinced, and the Caliph appointed a team of highly proficient and competent scribes to assist Hazrat Zaid in this noble task, but Hazrat Umar contributed the greatest degree of assistance. On this occasion, Hazrat Abu Bakr instructed Hazrat Zaid and Hazrat Umar, both of you sit on the gate of the Prophet's mosque, and whoever brings any Quranic verse along with two witnesses get it written. Accordingly, Hazrat Zaid used extremely cautious and meticulous techniques in compiling the Quran. He used all the methods available and did not include any verse in his master copy of the Quran unless he had received written and verbal testimonies proving its uninterrupted succession. In addition, the verses that the Holy Prophet had arranged to be written under his own supervision were still preserved by the companions, and Hazrat Zaid collected them together to make the master copy. For this, a public proclamation was made to the effect that anyone possessing any number of written verses should bring to Hazrat Zaid. When a written verse was brought to him, he would verify its authenticity by first testing its reliability against his own memory and secondly seeing Hazrat Umar's endorsement as the latter himself was a Hafiz. Thirdly, to make it totally flawless, he would seek two trustworthy witnesses who would testify to the fact that the particular verse had been written in the presence of the Holy Prophet, and finally, the written verses were matched with the collection and the different companions had prepared for themselves. Each surah was written on separate folios, and so the copy was composed of many folios. In the terminology of the Quranic studies, this fair copy prepared by Hazrat Zaid is called the Musaf, as it comprised several suhuf. The Musaf had some distinctive features. In this, the verses were arranged in accordance with the order identified by the Holy Prophet ﷺ, but the surahs were not so arranged as they were written separately, and the purpose of preparing this copy was to prepare an organized document with the collective approval of the whole Ummah and exercise of Ijma. The Musaf remained with Hazrat Abu Bakr, and after his death with Hazrat Umar, and after Hazrat Umar's martyrdom it went into the custody of Hazrat Hafsa, mother of the faithful and the daughter of Hazrat Umar, and thus became known as Musaf Hafsa. Hazrat Umar made arrangements for the teaching of the Quran throughout his empire. Hundreds of schools were set up throughout the Muslim empire for the teaching of the Holy Quran. Highly qualified teachers were hired for this purpose. Those companions who had memorized the Quran were sent to distant places to teach the Quran. He introduced the institution of Taraweeh prayer in Ramadan that offered a good opportunity to the memorizers of Quran and to refresh their learning it by heart. During the Caliphate of Hazrat Uthman, 644 to 656 AD, the Muslim Empire had expanded enormously to several remote non-Arab areas. According to Sahih Bukhari, Hazrat Hudhaifa bin Yaman had led an army to Armenia, Azerbaijan, where he witnessed disputes among the newly converted Muslims over the way the Quran should be recited. The Syrian troops followed the dialect of Miqdad bin Aswad and Abu al-Darda, whereas the Iraqi troops recited the Quran in the dialect of Abdullah bin Masud and Abu Musa Ashari, both the groups being recent converts, considered their respective dialects superior or accurate over that of the other group. Some of them went to the extent of declaring the others as pagans. Hazrat Hudhaifa drew the attention of the Caliph towards the serious danger of disunity among Muslims. The Caliph acted quickly and appointed a team of Hazrat Zaid bin Sabit, Hazrat Abdullah bin Zubair, Hazrat Said bin al-As, and Hazrat Abdurrahman bin Harith. This team prepared the copies of the Musaf Hafsa. In these copies, the surahs were arranged in the order of recitation, Tartibe Tawqifi. These copies were sent to various provinces of the Muslim Empire along with the reciters in order to ensure a standard version of recitation. On Hazrat Usman's orders, all The variants, including many incomplete copies, were burned. Part B. It was a wise decision to collect the scattered portions of the last divine message after the demise of God's last messenger, the Prophet. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had really not instructed his followers about compiling the Quran, and therefore Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was initially reluctant to do so. He, however, convinced he, however, was convinced by Hazrat Umar's advice, used his discretionary powers, and ordered compilation of the Quran. If this team of the Prophet's successors had not done so, the entire Ummah might have become the literalist instead of using its wisdom to cope with the new challenges. And the Prophet ﷺ had trained the companions to conduct ijma or qiyas in order to deal with new challenges. Companions of the Quran, compilations of the Quran became an example of ijma of the whole Muslim world. Finally, the three copies fulfilled God's promise mentioned in the Quran. We indeed sent down the message, and we will surely guard it against corruption. Surah 15, Ayat 9, Al Hijr. Question 3, Part A. The Prophet was described as humble and just, giving examples from his life. Write about events that describe these qualities. 10 marks. Part B. How can Muslims today apply the Prophet's example of humility when dealing either friends or strangers? 4 marks. Answer A. Humble. The Prophet behaved in a humble way throughout his life, both at Mecca and Medina. He lived a simple life, though in Medina several companions and his wives were always eager to assist him in daily chores of life. He used to mend his clothes and shoes, clean his house, and milk his goats himself. He encouraged others to do the same by saying, "One who works for himself is a friend of God." His food, garments, and bed were usually simple, and he often wore patched garments. He would take his food while sitting on the floor and say, "I am only a servant. I eat like a servant or a slave eats, and I sit as any servant sits." He participated in the construction of the mosque in Medina with his followers. Similarly, he worked with his companions while digging the trench before the siege of Medina by the Allies in 5 AH. He suffered more hunger than his companions, but continued to raise their morale. He never considered himself above others and did not like his followers to give him a standing ovation. He valued those around him by seeking their advice before making any major decision. When he entered Mecca victoriously, he did not display any pomp or show, nor did he look down upon his enemies. Instead, he bowed down on the camel in such a way that his beard touched the camel's back. In this posture, he was reciting the Quran and thanking God. He strictly forbade his army from expressing any spirit of revenge or pride against the Meccan pagans. The Prophet did not like to be treated as a king. Hazrat Abu Dhar narrated, "Once I observed Salman and Bilal arriving in the presence of the Prophet. Salman, out of respect, fell down at the Prophet's feet and kissed them. The Prophet admonished him by saying, 'Do not perform acts that the people performed for their emperors. I am just a servant from amongst the servants of God.' He entered Mecca in such a humble way that his head bowed down on his camel. while his beard touched the back of the Kaaba instead of acting in a proud and victorious way. He was reciting the Quranic verses. Just the Prophet demonstrated a strong sense of justice and urged his followers to do the same. He observed justice against himself, his close relatives, and companions. Hazrat Abdullah bin Masud reported an event of the uh, event of the Battle of Badr. Hazrat Abu Lubaba and Hazrat Ali accompanied the Prophet ﷺ, and it was the Prophet's turn to walk. The two companions the two companions said, "We will walk instead of you and let you ride." The Prophet replied, "You too are not stronger than me, and I am not in less need of rewards than you." Once a rich woman named Fatima from Banu Makhzum tribe was found guilty of theft. Her family sought the help of Hazrat Usama bin Zaid in order to influence the Prophet for her forgiveness. The Prophet remarked, "What destroyed the nations before you was that if a noble among them stole, they would forgive him. And if a poor person stole, they would inflict legal punishment on him. By God, if Fatima bint Muhammad stole, I would cut off her hand." On another occasion, a Muslim called Tama stole a shield from his Muslim neighbor. He cleverly hid the shield in a Jew's house. The matter was reported to the Prophet, and on investigation, the Jew stated, "Tama hid the shield in my house." Tama's relatives asked the Prophet to punish the Jew. The Prophet, however, received a revelation, and he announced that the Jew was innocent and that the Muslim had stolen the shield. The three Jewish tribes of Medina were also given punishments after after their repeated violation of the Charter of Medina. The Prophet did justice with all his wives, and he was fair when dividing matters between his wives, both when traveling and when resident in Medina. He always gave equal time to all his wives. He instructed whoever has two wives and favors one of them over the other, he will come on the day of resurrection with one of his sides leaning. He therefore forbade his followers from giving one wife preferential treatment over another one. We Muslims can observe humbleness in several ways. They should take initiative in greeting fellow Muslims, whether they're friends or strangers. They should remember this hadith: give food and greetings to those you know and those you do not know. In sports, sports or other walks of life, and they should not look down upon their rivals, and they should instead look down upon, they should instead express gratitude to God. Many Muslims sportsmen perform sajda in the playground after making some huge achievement. They should treat their employees kindly by not imposing on them a bossy attitude, believing that God had arranged a division of work for his servants. They should give their servants a good quality food and give them new clothes, and on special occasions like the two Eids, they should Participate in community welfare activities like cleaning their surroundings, including mosques and parks, without considering such acts as menial or low. Question 4, Part A. The Prophet died in 632 AD. Write about the events of the final year of his life. 10 marks. B. The farewell sermon given by the Prophet contains the teachings for Muslims of all times. Explain how two of these teachings can be applied today. 4 marks. Answer Part A. Last year of the life of the Prophet, 631 to 632 AD, or 10 AH to 11 AH, was marked by a number of important events, the most important being his farewell pilgrimage at sermon. In 9 AH, several delegations from all over Arabia came to the Prophet and embraced Islam. Treaties were signed with them and they promised to remain loyal to Islam. The 9 AH is therefore known as the Year of Delegations, Amul Wufud. The Prophet dispatched Hazrat Khalid bin Walid unto the tribe of Banu Harith of Najran and instructed him to first invite them peacefully to Islam. The tribe accepted Islam without reluctance and visited the Prophet in Shawwal 10 AH. In Ramadan 10 AH, he recited the Quran twice before Angel Jibril, and this is called Ardai Akhira. During the last days of the Qadha, 10 AH, the Prophet asked his companions to prepare for the Hajj. On 25th Qadha, he explained the Hajj rituals after Zuhr prayer and left for Makkah with 90,000 followers, all reciting the Talbiyah, expressions of submission to God. The Prophet rode his camel Kaswa and reached Mecca on fourth the Hajj. Reaching close to the Kaaba, he made a supplication and then entered the sacred mosque to perform the tawafiq, tawaf of the Kaaba and the sa'i between the Safa and Marwa hills. On 8th, he left for Mina and spent night there. Here he received the last complete surah of the Quran, Surah 110 Al-Nasr, the Help. His next destination was Arafat, where he observed the stay on 9th the Hajj from Zuhr to Maghrib. Here he delivered the historic sermon from the Mount of Mercy. He addressed 120. He addressed about 124,000 pilgrims that had come from all parts of Arabia and told them it might be his last address to them. O people, listen to my words, for I don't know whether after this year I shall be amongst you again. He highlighted the importance of the Quran and Sunnah for the guidance of Muslims by saying, I leave behind me two things, the Quran and the Sunnah, and if you follow these, you will never go astray. He reminded them that all humans would stand accountable before God on the day of judgment, and so they should follow the right path. He affirmed that he was the last messenger and that there would be no prophet or apostle after him, and no new religion would be revealed. The prophets stressed on the security of life, property, and honor of every Muslim by saying, just as you regard this month, this day, this city as sacred, so regard the life and property of every Muslim as sacred. Trust. He summed up the importance of the pillars of Islam by enjoining the Muslims worship God, say your 5 daily prayers, fast in Ramadan, and give your wealth in zakat. Perform Hajj if you can afford it. Similarly, he emphasized on the rights of women and slaves in a Muslim society and instructed his followers to treat both kindly. He said it is true that you have certain rights regarding your women, but they also have rights over you. Treat your women well and be kind to them regarding the rights of slaves. He said, feed your slaves such food as you eat, and clothe them with what you wear. This way, he ordered to fulfill the basic needs of slaves so that the concept of slavery underwent a revolutionary change in an Islamic state. The Prophet also reiterated the abolition of usury riba and strictly forbade his followers from these practices of exploiting the weak. He categorically declared all interest obligations shall henceforth be waived. He then announced the waiving of interest by giving named examples. Finally, he made God a witness and asked all to convey his message to all those who could not attend his sermon. He then offered Zuhrain, combining Zuhur and Asr, and right then he received the last revelation. This day have I perfected your religion for you, completely my favor upon you, and have chosen for you Islam as your religion. Surah 5, Ayat 3, Al Ma'idah. At sunset, he left for Muzdalifah, where he offered the Maghriban, combined Maghrib and Isha, and spent night. After the Fajr prayer, he came unto the Mashare, Masharul Haram, faced the Qibla, and prayed to God. Before sunrise, he moved to Mina to perform a Rami of Jamarai Aqaba. Soon Hazrat Ali joined him from Yemen. Then he sacrificed 63 camels, one for each year of his life. Then he performed Tawaf-e Ifada and then Sa'i between the Safa and Marwa hills. He was back into Mina the same day to spend 3 nights and perform Rami of all three Jamarat until 12th Dhul Hajj. And this way he demonstrated the complete method of Hajj. After his last Hajj, the Prophet started his journey for Medina. At Ghadir Hum, he delivered a brief speech at the end of which he raised Hazrat Ali's hand in his hand and said, "O whomsoever I am Mawla, Lord friend, this Ali is his Mawla too." And this is taken by the supporters of Hazrat Ali as an indication of making him as the Prophet's successor. Finally, he reached Medina. By the end of 10 a.m., he received a letter from Musalma in which he claimed the prophethood and offered the Prophet to give half of Arabia to him. The Prophet rejected his claim. In Safar 11 AD 632 AD, he fell ill with a severe headache and fever. On the fifth day of his illness, he shifted to Hazrat Aisha's apartment. Soon he appointed Hazrat Abu Bakr as Imam to lead the daily prayer. He called for his wives, his daughter Hazrat Fatima, and his grandsons Hazrat Hassan and Hazrat Hussein. He whispered in Hazrat Fatma's ear that he was going to leave this world, on which she cried. Then he whispered again and that she would be the first one to see him in paradise. This statement cheered her up. On the last day of his life, 12th Rabiul Awwal, he came into the mosque, offered 12th Rabiul Awwal, offered prayer with Hazrat Abu Bakr, and begged forgiveness from God. He issued a number of instructions to his followers, for example, about religious duties, and rights of others. He returned to Hazrat Aisha's apartment where, praying in a whisper, he breathed his last in her arms. Hazrat Ali and Hazrat Abbas bathed his body and buried him in Hazrat Aisha's apartment. His death came as a big shock to his followers, and it was Hazrat Abu Bakr who calmed down the shocked Muslims. Part B. The Prophet, in his farewell sermon, declared all humans are equal by saying, "No Arab is superior to a non Arab, nor is a non Arab superior to an Arab." Muslims today need to learn a lot from this declaration of the Prophet and should not boast of their lineage or caste. And they should promote a culture of intermarriages between members of different lineage or other families. Gendered Muslims do not take pride in the lineage or caste system, considering some caste superior or inferior. The Prophet also provides usury, interest. Muslim states should try to replace interest-based banking with Islamic banking based on mudariba or musharika. In these systems, a kind of joint investment is made, and the investors agree and to share both profit and loss. In traditional banking, there are so much agreements. The Quran warns Muslims about riba and instructs them to practice trade. Question 5. Part A. The Prophet allowed some of the early Muslims to move to Abyssinia. Write about the events of this migration. 10 marks. Part B. Can this migration be compared to the migration of some Muslims today? Give reasons for your answer. 4 marks. Answer Part A. Persecutions and opposition by Quraysh got intensified from 610 to 615 AD. They targeted the slaves and the poor Muslims like Hazrat Bilal, Hazrat Zinira, Hazrat Ammar bin Jasir and his parents, and Hazrat Khabab bin al-Arat. At the same time, the conversion of Hazrat Hamza further angered the Quraysh. They redoubled their opposition to Islam. The Prophet then received the divine permission. Good is for those who do good in this world, and God's earth is spacious. Surah 39, Ayat 10 Al-Zumar. The Prophet ﷺ allowed some of his followers to migrate to Abyssinia, an African state west of Arabia. The Prophet ﷺ knew that Shama, who held the title of Najashi or the Negus, was a fair ruler of Abyssinia, or Abyssinia, Ethiopia. So he allowed some of the Muslims to migrate to Abyssinia. Accordingly, in Rajab of the fifth year of prophethood, 615 AD, a group of 12 men, 4 women, left Makkah, and they included Hazrat Uthman and his wife Hazrat Ruqayyah. The Prophet ﷺ on this occasion remarked, and they are the first people to migrate in the cause of God after Ibrahim at Lot. This was the first migration to the first phase of migration, or the first phase of migration to Abyssinia. These emigrants found a safe haven in Abyssinia under the just and kind rule of King Candace in Ramadan of the same year. The Prophet ﷺ received the verses of Surah 53 Al-Najm that he recited before a huge crowd by the Kaaba. All the pagans were moved by the tone of these verses, and they bowed down along with the Prophet. The rumor of their conversion reached Abyssinia, and the emigrants came back to Mecca. However, they were once again targeted by the Meccans who refused to believe in the Prophet. Shortly afterwards, a second batch of emigrants, left Mecca, comprising 83 men and 19 women. This was the second migration to Abyssinia. These emigrants too found solace and comfort in Abyssinia, much to the dismay of the Quraysh. The Quraysh chiefs got worried over this new development, and apprehending the possible growth of Islam, they decided to counter the move. Two notable Meccans, Amr bin al-As and Abdullah bin Rabi'a, were dispatched to influence the niggers against the Muslim emigrants. They carried rich bribes with them and complained to the military generals as well as the king niggers about the escape of their fellow Meccans. The emigrants they blamed had renounced their religion not for the sake of Christianity but for a new religion. The king summoned the emigrants who included such notables as Hazrat Uthman, Hazrat Hamza bin Abdul Muttalib, and Hazrat Jafar bin Abu Talib, all with an influential background. Niggers interviewed them about Islam, and Hazrat Jafar bin Abu Talib, who led the Muslims, delivered a convincing speech before the niggers. He said, O king, we were ignorant people. We worshipped idols, ate carrion, and committed all sorts of injustice. A brother wronged his brother. The strong exploited the weak. In these circumstances, the noble man Hazrat Muhammad ﷺ called us to Islam, taught us to denounce idol worship, be trust, be trust, be trustful, be truthful, abstain from bloodshed, be good to others, avoid fornication, offer prayers, observe fasts, and to pay charity. We abandoned all evil practices, and for this were deemed guilty, and our people turned against us. Then he recited the following verses of Surah Maryam and make mention of Mary in the book when she withdrew from the people unto a place towards the east and secluded herself from them, and we sent unto her our spirit. He said, I am only a messenger from your Lord, that I may give you the news of the birth of a holy son. Surah 19, ayat 16 to 21, Maryam. The niggers and his generals were deeply moved, and they felt their hearts softened by the recitation. Then niggers said, This has truly come from the same source as that which Jesus brought. Then he turned unto the Meccan envoys and said, You may go, for by God I will not deliver them unto you. They shall not be betrayed. They however, returned unto the king the following morning and persuaded him to ask the emigrants their beliefs about Jesus. The king summoned the Muslims again and asked them about Jesus Christ. Hazrat Jafar replied that Jesus is the slave of God and his messenger and his spirit and his word which he cast unto Mary, the Blessed Virgin. The negus took up a piece of wood and said, Jesus, the son of Mary, exceeds not what you have said by the length of this stick. He allowed the Muslims to live there and to send Meccans back. Part B. In modern times, many Muslims are forced to leave their homeland due to a threat unto their lives. For example, Rohingya Muslims are facing very hard times in Myanmar, Burma at the hands of non-Muslim extremists. They have to seek asylum in Bangladesh or some remote non-Muslim or Muslim states. Often, they have to live in refugee camps, and this is unlike the migration of Abyssinia. Those with a good fortune manage to start a new phase of life with varying categories of success. However, regardless of all this, they should believe in God's promise, and those who migrate in the cause of God certainly will God provide them with a sustenance. Surah 22, Ayat 58, Al-Hajj. Many other migrants from Syria or Afghanistan manage to live comfortably in the advanced Western countries, where practicing religion is a personal matter. In such countries, the Muslim immigrants can practice their religion freely. New Zealand and Canada are great examples in this regard.